The Venezuelan armed forces this Monday foiled a second attempted mercenary incursion from neighbouring Colombia. The leaders of member states of the non-aligned movement held a virtual summit this Monday in response to COVID-19. The number of global coronavirus cases surpassed 3.6 million on Monday, while the death toll has surpassed 250,000. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. The Venezuelan armed forces this Monday foiled another terrorist infiltration from neighbouring Colombia, putting an end to a second attempt to breach the Bolivarian Republic's territorial integrity. Organised sectors of the Venezuelan population confronted the 8 mercenaries before they could further infiltrate the territory of the Bolivarian Republic. This is the second time in the past 2 days that terrorists have attempted to illegally enter Venezuela via naval incursion from neighbouring Colombia. President of the Constituent Assembly, Diosdado Cabello, said shortly after the arrest of the terrorists that their capture was thanks to collective efforts. The Venezuelan authorities are still investigating the attempted incursion into the country on Sunday, which saw the arrest of one US-sponsored drug enforcement agency agent and the death of some of the mercenaries. And speaking during a virtual summit of the non-aligned movement this Monday, President Nicolas Maduro addressed the failed terrorist incursion that took place this Sunday, May 3rd, in La Guaira state.
Yesterday, May 3rd, Venezuela faced a failed maritime incursion from mercenaries and terrorists trained in Colombia, with the financing of the government of the United States and the current government of Colombia. That group of terrorists was confronted by the Civic Military Police Union. The terrorists were captured and gave all the details of their planned attack. We have all the evidence that this group was trained in Colombian territory.
And Venezuelan Attorney General Tarek William Saab offered details of the attack on Venezuelan sovereignty this Sunday. He showed a contract signed between extreme sectors of the opposition and mercenaries with direct links to the United States government.
Hardy mercenaries who have signed nothing more and nothing less than contracts for $212 million. Money that was committed from the money looted and stolen from PDVSA in Citgo in Monomeros, in the frozen accounts that the country has abroad. The gold held abroad that they have also attempted to steal and blocked access to. This contract is already public and notorious, and we can see the signatures. Nobody can deny who they are. In this case, I will mention them. It is signed by the citizen Juan Guaidó, among others, the former parliamentarian of the Popular Will Party and fugitive, Sergio Vergara, contracted publicist linked to these mercenary activities, known as Gigi Rendon, and Jordan Woodrow himself, who appears as the paid and third-party leader. Here, we have to say this very clearly. He does not act alone. He knows that the government of the United States uses third parties. That is, it gives a third party the dagger to kill, supposedly someone with no links to it, but obviously linked to the intelligence services of the United States of North America.
The United States backed armed mercenaries who departed from Colombia and attempted to enter Venezuela by sea in the early hours of this Sunday, who were met with a crushing response by the Bolivarian armed forces.
Like clockwork, official voices from the United States initiated a countdown that was echoed in social media. The chronicle of an announced attack continued into the early hours of Sunday, May 3rd, with a spread of videos that showed alleged clashes and helicopters circling the Macuto area in the coastal state of La Guajira. Venezuela's intelligence agencies confirmed the neutralization of an attempted military raid by sea that set off from Colombia.
These terrorists tried to enter using speedboats through the state of La Guaira, but thanks to the timely actions of our Bolivarian armed forces and the special forces of the National Police, some were neutralized while others were detained.
This military operation was aided by civilian forces. According to authorities, the deserters and mercenaries will take shelter in this house, from which they would carry out terrorist acts and would target officials for assassination in the latest attempt at a coup.
Detrás de esto está Estados Unidos.
Behind this is the United States, the Colombian oligarchy, and the drug traffickers.
Leales siempre, traidores nunca.
La Fuerza Armada Nacional Bolivariana.
The Bolivarian Armed Forces, through the defense minister, declared absolute loyalty to President Nicolás Maduro.
Todas las unidades militares
The armed forces are on alert across the nation.
permanecen en alerta, preparadas.
Autoridades aseguran que continúan las
Authorities have declared that investigations are ongoing and further detentions could be coming.
Rolando Segura, Telesur, Caracas.
And the moves behind the latest attacks on Venezuela have been revealed on social media. A contract agreed between the self-proclaimed president of Venezuela, Juan Guaidó, and Jordan Godreau for an a la carte invasion of Venezuela was shared on Twitter. The contract was formally witnessed by lawyer Manuel Retureta, whose signature appears on the last page presented today. Retureta is a lawyer from the Retureta and Wasson firm, which works for Latin American drug traffickers. Meanwhile, US military contractor Jordan Godreau, who appears as the signatory alongside Juan Guaidó in the contract to undertake military incursions into Venezuela, has himself confirmed the authenticity of the document.
No, not at all. Not at all. So at this point, because the contract has been completely fractured and nothing has been upheld on the side of the opposition, absolutely. So I mean, there is really no contract.
So you're saying there is a contract?
Absolutely.
And although Jordan Godreau has claimed he is not a mercenary, he confessed he has never seen such a level of betrayal regarding the breach of contract by Venezuelan lawmaker Juan Guaidó. Godreau stressed that despite having access to millions of US dollars, Guaidó never paid the agreed amount for military attacks agreed in the framework of the Inter-American Treaty of Reciprocal Assistance invoked against the Venezuelan government.
You have these guys who have access to millions of dollars.
Ellos tienen acceso a millones de dólares.
They were just given another, I think they were given, what was it, like another $10 million, $90 million,
Creo que les
I'm
acaban
sorry.
de dar 90 millones de dólares.
9 million of which was allocated to
9
defense.
millones fueron para defensa.
They knew, and they're gonna deny all this. They knew there were guys in the frontier.
Ellos van a negar
struggling.
eso, pero
Like,
sabían que teníamos hombres en la frontera.
you had 60 Venezuelans who were hungry, still training, thinking about liberation, and they went and did it.
60 venezolanos estaban entrenando, tenían hambre, pero seguían pensando en la liberación, así que fueron y lo hicieron.
Meanwhile, your opposition government is making tons of money.
More stories coming up after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The leaders of countries of the non-aligned movement held a virtual meeting this Monday in response to COVID-19. Convened by the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, in his capacity as chair of the non-aligned movement, the United Against COVID-19 summit includes the participation of Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and Iranian President Hassan Rouhani. Early speakers included President Aliyev, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Outcomes of the summit will include the adoption of a declaration underlining the importance of international solidarity in the fight against COVID-19 and the establishment of a task force to develop a database reflecting the medical, social and humanitarian needs of NAM members to tackle the pandemic.
At this very outset.
Thank you, Mr.
And speaking during the Non-Aligned Movement Summit, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro demanded an end to the unilateral sanctions against Venezuela, Cuba and Iran in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Maduro also presented the idea of the creation of an international humanitarian fund sponsored by NAM countries, as well as the creation of an international scientific group to lead research on the novel coronavirus.
Today I'm able to say that in the 8th week of quarantine, we have controlled the transmission chains of COVID-19. We're almost at the point of cutting the transmission chains. We have been able to receive international support from Cuba, which has sent an enormous team of doctors with great experience. We have also received logistic support from China and Russia. Without their support, it would have been impossible to perform the million of tests which we have done.
Tenemos
We have 357 confirmed cases and unfortunately 10 deaths. Out of the 357 confirmed cases, 158 cases have recovered. 96 are hospitalized in public hospitals, 76 in public clinics, 22 in private clinics, and 10 deaths. Thanks to the World Health Organization, the UNICEF, we have been able to channel the arrival of humanitarian aid. Since Venezuela is submitted to a financial economic blockade by the government of the United States that impedes us from buying health medical supplies in the world.
Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermúdez, speaking during the Non-Aligned Movement Summit this Monday, called to globalise solidarity over and above the market and urged NAM countries to learn from each other's experiences in tackling the current health crisis. The Cuban president also condemned the recent terrorist attack on the Cuban embassy in Washington.
In response to requests that were made in the last month, 25 new brigades of Cuban health professionals have joined the efforts of 23 countries to fight the pandemic. They have joined those who have been already providing services in 59 states, many of which are NAM members. Cuba shall not give up its solidarity vocation, even when out of political reasons, the U.S. government continues to attack and hinder Cuba's international cooperation, which jeopardizes access to health services for tens of millions of people. Due to its seriousness, I must denounce the terrorist attack with an assault rifle and the firing of over 30 rounds on our embassy in Washington, D.C. on April 30th. I demand from the U.S. government a thorough and swift investigation, harsh sanctions, security measures and guarantees for our diplomatic missions in its territory, as it must under the 1961 Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations.
And the Cuban president condemned the failed armed incursion into Venezuela this Sunday, while he called for peace in the region.
Serious military threats by the government of the United States against the sisterly Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. We reaffirm our solidarity with the government and people of Nicaragua and reject measures against our right to well-being, security, and peace. The attempts at reimposing the neocolonial past to our America by publicly declaring the validity of the Monroe Doctrine are contrary to the proclamation of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa welcomed the launch by the WHO of global collaboration to accelerate access to new health technologies to combat COVID-19. As current chair of the African Union, Ramaphosa informed that African nations have organised a COVID-19 response fund to support the work of the Africa Centres for Disease Control and Prevention. Meanwhile, he called on international partners, the IMF and the World Bank, to defer debt and waive interest. Ramaphosa also called to lift unilateral sanctions against Cuba and Venezuela.
This is the time for solidarity, not for exclusion or for vengeance or for revenge. The clear sign of solidarity has been demonstrated to us in South Africa and a number of other countries on the African continent. And in the case of South Africa, this was demonstrated when His Excellency President Miguel Díaz-Canel agreed to my request to send Cuban doctors to South Africa. 217 doctors and medical staff arrived last week in South Africa. We in turn sent medical supplies to Cuba to assist them.
In his speech, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani condemned the United States government for suspending funding to the World Health Organization, describing the behavior as irresponsible and reckless.
At a time when the World Health Organization is leading the front line, the global battle against the threat of the coronavirus, undermining the World At a time when the World Health Organization is leading the front line, the global battle against the threat of the coronavirus, undermining the World At a time when the World Health Organization is leading the front line, the global battle against the threat of the coronavirus, undermining the World.
And an alliance of world leaders held a virtual summit on Monday, hoping to drum up billions of dollars to fund research into a coronavirus vaccine, as well as to develop new treatments and more efficient testing. Organisers included the European Union, non-EU states Britain and Norway, as well as Japan, Canada, Saudi Arabia and China. The European Union pledged €1 billion for the global search for vaccines and treatment. Meanwhile, the Japanese government announced it will make total investment of approximately $8 million at home and abroad to contribute to global COVID-19 efforts. Germany also pledged €525 million, while German Chancellor Angela Merkel said the summit of world leaders was a sign of hope, stressing that the pandemic was a global challenge that required global solutions.
Only the development, production and deployment of vaccines and treatments will relegate the virus to the archives of history. Without these, we can demand the hardest sacrifices from our citizens or design the most ambitious recovery plans. The threat will always be there. These vaccines, treatments and therapies will be crucial for Europe, but even more critical for our most vulnerable partners with fragile health systems such as Africa. They must be at the heart of our solidarity.
And we're taking one last break now, but stay with us for more. Welcome back to From the South. The number of global coronavirus cases surpassed 3.6 million on Monday, while the death toll has surpassed 250,000. In this context, the World Health Organization fears there is substantial underreporting of the real numbers, even as the rate of fatalities and new cases slows. North America and Europe, where growth rates are easing, still accounted for most of the new cases reported in recent days. However, case numbers are rising in Latin America, Africa and Russia, and experts have voiced concern that the overall data falls well short of the true impact of the pandemic. Globally, more than 74,700 new cases were reported over the past 24 hours. The novel coronavirus case numbers compared to the 3 to 5 million cases of severe illness caused annually by seasonal influenza, according to the WHO, but fall far short of the Spanish flu, which began in 1918 and infected an estimated 500 million people. The novel coronavirus has infected more than 1.2 million people in the United States and killed more than 69,000. More than 1,000 additional deaths have been announced every day since April 2nd. The continued spread of the virus and the rise in the death toll comes as political leaders seek to reopen parts of the country. However, stay-at-home orders remain in effect in many states. In Florida, where some beaches have been recently reopened to the public, the tally exceeded 36,000 confirmed cases on Sunday, while the number of deaths rose to more than 1,300, as 615 additional cases and 15 fatalities were reported in less than 24 hours, according to official figures. US President Donald Trump said on Sunday that he now believes as many as 100,000 Americans could die due to the coronavirus pandemic after the death toll surpassed his earlier estimates.
We're going to lose anywhere from 75, 80 to 100,000 people. That's a horrible thing. We shouldn't lose one person over this. I really believe you can go to parks, you can go to beaches, you keep it, you keep the spread, you stay away a certain amount. And I really think the public has been incredible with that's one of the reasons we're successful. That's one of the, if you call losing 80 or 90,000 people successful, but it's one of the reasons that we're not at that high end of the plane as opposed to the low end of the plane. That number is...
Italy was among a large number of countries easing lockdown restrictions on Monday, but officials warned against moving too fast. Italy is the third hardest hit nation in the world in terms of coronavirus cases and the second in terms of fatalities. Italian authorities started to relax the longest lockdown in Europe this Monday, allowing about 4.5 million people to return to work after nearly 2 months at home. However, officials have stressed that the easing of measures does not mean people should lower their guard. Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte said the country was still in the full throes of the pandemic and that phase 2 of the lockdown must not be seen as a signal that everyone is free to act as before. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez announced on Saturday that 6 million face masks would be distributed across the country as authorities began lifting some lockdown measures. In Madrid, Red Cross workers handed out protective masks at metro stations on Monday as Spain began a 4-phase plan to reopen the country by the end of June. Meanwhile, the daily COVID-19 death toll remained under 200 for the second day in a row. Mask usage on public transport is now mandatory, while small businesses like beauty salons and bookstores have reopened, offering limited services. Spain remains the second hardest hit country in the world, with over 248,000 cases and more than 25,000 fatalities. The number of active confirmed cases of COVID-19 in mainland China has fallen below 500, an all-time low since January 23rd. According to Chinese health authorities, a total of 481 COVID-19 patients remain hospitalized. Mi Feng, spokesperson for the National Health Commission, said at a press conference in Beijing that China had reported a total of 92 new cases in the past 2 weeks. However, he said it was necessary to remain vigilant to protect against the spread of the virus. Africa's oil-producing nations have not been spared the impact of the fall in demand and prices due to the novel coronavirus pandemic. In April, major oil producers across the world agreed to a production cut of 10 million barrels a day in May and June in order to shore up plummeting prices. About 14 countries in sub-Saharan Africa produce oil, which accounts for most of their annual export income. Africa's major oil producers include Nigeria, Angola and Gabon. Crude oil prices rose marginally on Friday, May 1st, as producers started reducing output. A rise in oil prices between $50 and $60 would allow African nations to earn the badly needed hard currency to carry out development projects. And we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.
为了保持身体健康